Show that put blank into popular culture.
Boobs.
Boobs. Boobs, as they say on the show.
The big bad wolf said, I just came from a house where this old lady had the biggest blanks I ever saw.
Boobs.
It was groundbreaking in the 70s.
I have been so shocked and outraged by an answer in my entire life.
On network TV, they're showing their boobs now.
I said, bazooms.
It's the first show that broke all the rules.
Get awful one.
The rules? Oh, there were no rules.
The recipe for Match Game's success, Gene Rayburn, the great panel of mixed celebrities, and the titillating questions.
I got my blank stuck in a soda bottle.
You never knew what the panelists were going to say.
He's gourd.
It was always interesting to see them completely raw, answering a question, just being themselves.
You're going.
When I'd watch Match Game as a kid, I would just say, who are these people?
Is that a joke?
It may never be duplicated with the kind of chemistry that you had in the 70s.
It was a party.
And the vodka wasn't bad either.
Oh, I spilled my drink.
Build your drink.
GSN presents the real Match Game story.
Time to say goodbye.
Behind the Blank.
To Match Game 73, Gene Rayburn.
Everybody plays. Brand new game. Everyone at the North Pole was shocked to see Santa Claus being blanked by his elves.
Charles Nelson Riley worked on Broadway in a play called
Linda Blank.
The American actress, Miss Linda Lovelace.
He wrote his own bio. The last sentence was, Mr. Riley is 29 years old and totally adorable. I'll never forget, in the beginning, Mark Goodson used to write these long memos to the producer. He says, what is Rayburn doing? He's getting laughs. He's getting laughs. He thought that was terrible because he thought the most important thing was the game.
Now, here's your host, Gene Rayburn.
It premiered on New Year's Eve, 1962. The Match Game was a product of the most prolific game show producer in television history, Mark Goodson.
Obviously one of the great geniuses of the game show industry. He and his partner created so many great game shows.
The creative dynamo of Goodson Todman Productions had overseen a string of hits, including What's My Line, To Tell the Truth, I've Got a Secret, Beat the Clock, Password, and The Price is Right.
He was one of the most intimidating men I had ever met. He was wildly successful, enormously wealthy, and the most beautifully dressed man I have ever seen in my life.
If he came to the studio, oh my God, because he would make sure that the lighting was right, and the people looked right, and the mic sounded right, and the announcer's voice was right.
As I remember correctly, even the buzzer or the wind bell had to be perfect for Mark.
The simple premise that would become the crown jewel of Goodson's daytime dynasty came from one of his staffers.
The original idea for Match Game came from a fellow named Frank Wayne. He worked at Goodson Todman for many, many years.
There must have been like 8 of us there. Everybody had a paper and a pencil. And he said, okay, now what I want you to do is I want you to write down...
He said, write down something about an elephant.
the answer you think other people are going to write.
Somebody wrote down it's gray, somebody wrote it had a trunk. We can see right away the intrigue in that.
Name a musical instrument in a dance band.
A lot of people in the current generation never saw the original Match Game. in the 60s.
First, name a musical instrument of dance band.
Saxophone.
Saxophone. Gene, which one did you choose?
Drum.
The drum. And Orson?
It was a more cerebral show. It was a calmer show.
A sax. Sax is a man.
The show was much more of a competition between two teams.
There were two contestants led by a celebrity team captain on one side and the same on the other side.
But Match Game's real star from the very beginning was a song and dance man named Gene Rayburn.
My father grew up in Chicago. He wanted to be an opera singer, and he came to New York when he was 18 and became a member of the page and guide staff at NBC.
His first big break came in the late 1940s. He teamed up with comedian Dee Finch for a Manhattan radio show.
They had the morning drive time show called Anything Goes.
WNEW here in New York City, Rayburn and Finch.
He scored another first in 1954, sitting next to Steve Allen for the premiere of The Tonight Show.
So long before Ed McMahon and Johnny Carson, it was Steve Allen and Gene Rayburn. He was TV's original second banana.
He performed on Broadway as the lead in Bye Bye Birdie, and also filled in as guest host on The Tonight Show. When NBC bought Match Game in 1962, Mark Goodson offered Rayburn his very own show.
Gene Rayburn was probably one of the funniest MCs to ever do a game show. And I think one of the big reasons is that on the air, Gene never lost that little boy mischief.
With a proven track record, a brand new format, and a talented host, Goodson launched the Match Game and watched as it flopped.
So we get no match from either side.
It ran for a year, and the renewal date had come and passed, and so the show was canceled, but we had 6 weeks of production to go. I went home, and over the weekend, I thought about it, and I came back, and I said, you know, I work for Mad Magazine. Did you ever think about doing silly questions?
Dick DiBartolo wrote all of the questions. Name a color flower, or name a kind of bread, or things like that.
Name something you need in order to play baseball.
Well, what's a silly question? I said, how about Mary liked to pour gravy on John's blank?
It was startling because it sounds funny. It just got a dirty sound to it.
So we went to Mark, and Goodson said, the show is canceled. They can't cancel it twice. Do what you want. Within the 6 remaining weeks of production, the ratings started to pick up.
The network decided to renew it, and celebrities began clamoring to play the revamped version of the Match Game.
He's one of the most versatile young men in show business, Mr. Orson Bean.
Most of the celebrities, they were really big.
We ended up getting Gloria Swanson.
Lauren Bacall was on the show. She did a number of times with us.
Joe Garagiola liked doing the show.
We got Johnny Carson.
Ethel Merman.
And Mickey Mantle.
We had Dustin Hoffman and
Bill Cosby did our show.
Jane Mansfield and you name it.
The internationally celebrated motion picture star, Miss Jane Mansfield.
We did the 5 shows in a day. I remember one time she came, Jane didn't bring enough changes of clothing. Somehow or another, I got trapped in a dressing room with her, and I whipped off my T-shirt, and she whipped off what she was wearing, and she wasn't wearing anything underneath, and I thought I was going to pass out. And I gave her my T-shirt, and she taped a show, and she came back, and I put the T-shirt back on, and it was all stretched out. But it was stretched out by Jane Mansfield, and that was, like, amazing.
This Mansfield episode is one of the few copies that remain of the Match Game's first format.
There was resistance from Goodson in the beginning. It was a weak format that needed to be goosed up in some way, and my way was to inject some humor into it and have some fun with it.
Coming up, the Match Game moves west and to the top of the ratings.
When it went to California, it just became bedlam out there.
Brett sold her body to the highest bidder at a party.
Yes? How much did she get?
Well, he gave her change.
First of all, you could say anything. You don't have to be smart. Who wants to do password?
The best use of celebrities on game shows is when the show is designed to be a celebrity show. Match Game was a forerunner, absolutely.
Oh, here we are. Hello there.
Match Game, launched in 1962, stayed on the air until the end of the decade.
In '69, the game show business collapsed just generally. And the people who were running daytime at NBC began dumping these game shows left and right.
All television died in New York in the end of the 60s, which was sad.
In 1971, the Federal Communications Commission changed the rules for syndication, allowing production companies to sell more shows, even reruns, to independent stations.
Goodson Todman, I believe, started rerunning game shows. In the old days, it was you do the game and who wants to see a game again? Well, they threw away an awful lot of games before they realized it was a whole industry that they could keep rerunning them.
Shows were coming from California. People were moving to California. There were a lot of celebrities in California. They liked the sun, they liked the water, they liked the convertibles.
Everyone had to go to LA.
Goodson moved his company to the new industry capital and relaunched his game show dynasty.
Goodson called me and he said, we're moving the Match Game to LA. Do you want to go? And I said, no, I don't want to go. Goodson said, as long as there's a Match Game, you'll have a paycheck. You can write from here. So the show went and I stayed.
In the summer of 1973, as the last American soldiers pulled out of Vietnam and hearings on the Watergate break-in opened in Washington,
Get ready to match the stars.
Match Game made its way back into millions of American homes with a twist.
The panel was Goodson's idea. He thought it'd be a good thing to do a show with a lot of celebrities.
Look at these beautiful people.
It gave Rayburn so much more opportunity. He had 6 people to work with.
Here. Now I welcome you to Match Game 73. This is your old favorite updated with more action, more money, and as you can see, more celebrities.
Jack Klugman, star of the hit sitcom The Odd Couple, appeared on the pilot.
Jack came to me and he said, listen, could you do me a favor? He said, would you book Brett, who was his wife?
The sexiest thing a woman can wear is blank.
And with the exclusion of my wife, nothing.
He said, she's driving me crazy. So I said, sure.
Listen, we're delighted to see this lady because her husband has been on the program. I guess everybody knows that Brett Summers is Jack Klugman.
They asked me to do it, and I said, sure. And they said, would you do the next 5?
The first time a boy kissed Susie, she blank.
In the immortal words of Jack Klugman, belted him.
Belted him.
It turned into 9 years. Isn't that amazing?
I've been had. I'm so butch and I love sports. Okay, be ready for it, kids. Feathers.
Within the first several weeks, they hired an actor who had worked with Gene Rayburn on Broadway.
Yesterday, Mary blanked her wedding dress.
I wasn't really friendly with Charles until we did the show. He never called me by my name. He called me Susan or she.
She would probably burn her wedding dress.
He would go, she's got a new hairdo. Have you seen it?
Charles.
See the retainer she's wearing?
Yes.
There's a chance that it's just retaining too much.
They hired one more regular that first year.
There is the man you played with last time.
A British sitcom star named Richard Dawson.
You sat there and took the best shots, that came along.
Maybe she thought I was playing. I've never been more serious in my life, Derek.
There was some sort of magnetic draw between Richard and the contestants.
He was a devil. He was funny.
Blanking high.
Getting high.
Getting high.
He had that great look. You know what I mean? He had that George Clooney, salt and pepper hair. He had that tan, that accent.
If you're ever going that way again,
Let me know.
come up and see me sometime.
He was about as sexy as a snail. I mean...
Richard? His mind worked like a steel trap, but he wasn't the happiest man in the world.
With 3 celebrity regulars and 3 rotating guests, the Match Game became an instant hit for CBS.
Until next time, Gene Rayburn saying so long for Match Game 73.
I didn't think it would last that long. I had no way of judging. I knew that as long as the numbers were good, we'd last.
Coming up, the secret ingredient to Match Game's success.
To go full steam ahead, you have to have a full head of steam.
You ought to know.
All right. Some of our cast members like to indulge.
Let me suck these out.
Hi.
We were just a bunch of people who got together and had a good time.
And here is the $5,000 question. Quick as a blank. Quick as a blank.
Within weeks of going on the air in the summer of 1973.
Charlie, quick as a...
Wink.
He says wink.
The good times had begun.
Betty, may we see your response?
Wink!
Wink!
CBS schedule was a combination of, I'd say, older soap operas and comedy reruns. And Match Game was instantly a success.
Yes, Richard.
I hate when McLean does that.
People at home felt like they're part of this party. You hear the question, you know your answer, and then suddenly Richard Dawson says your answer.
Before the Royal King got into the royal pool, he dipped his royal blank in it.
Or Brett says it, and you're nodding, say, that's exactly what I said. That's what I said. And Charles says, that's the stupidest answer I ever heard.
Oh, is she a sick lady?
Match Game was the #1 show on daytime television. It was #1 over all the soaps, all the other game shows. Match Game was #1 for 3 consecutive years.
Really? Oh, I would have asked for more money.
I think it was always interesting watching the celebrities play because, again, it was kind of like a reality part of the celebrity. Like, you see that celebrity on television, you see them when everything's scripted in the magazines, things like that. But to see them completely raw, just being themselves, was really interesting.
For Mark Goodson and the show's producers, there was a method to the madness.
Casting a panel is like casting a play.
A comedian or sitcom star, almost always a man, was seated top left.
Okay, Nipsey.
All the roaches have money.
All the roaches have money.
I got the second seat, which was fine. I loved that. There was Charles.
Took her 3 years to learn tuna fish.
The 4th seat was kind of the ditzy blonde, you know, smart like a fox.
It was the first seat on the bottom tier, what we called the dummy seat.
Really cute and really adorable and really like that.
That was our leading lady, so to speak.
I guess we can't show you with her.
I'm going with Richard.
And then Dickie Dawson.
He was kind of the matinee idol on the panel.
I don't want to be in the 6th chair.
Oh.
That last seat, that's the worst seat, because everything has been said.
You couldn't just say what the other 5 people had said. You had to make your own individual stamp, and so it was harder than it looked.
You know, on this show, if whenever there's any doubt, there are 2 answers. One is boobs and the other is Howard Cosell.
Right.
At the end of each game, the leading contestant played Supermatch with 3 of the 6 panelists.
We polled a studio audience not too long ago, and we said, write down your best answer to this. Village blank. Like 3 of the 6 celebrities can help.
Richard.
Part I'm up for, the village idiot.
The village idiot.
I will go along with Richard.
You want to go along with him? May we see it? Yeah!
If they won, they could then go for 10 times the jackpot in the head-to-head match.
Well, I'm going to sound like an egomaniac, but they mainly picked me.
Everybody picked him because everybody thought he was the best player and made the most matches.
Richard again.
Okay, Richard. For $5,000, blank nuts, N-U-T-S.
Peanuts.
Peanuts.
he had a link to the audience.
Okay.
I mean, it's not coincidental that he was so good on the head-to-heads. He was good because he thought what people were thinking.
I thought of chest, nuts, and so that's too blatant.
Yes.
If I don't get a real kiss this time, I'm going to be furious.
But the star of the show was the one performer who had been there from the beginning.
And now here's your host, Gene Rayburn.
Rayburn was very good at New York, but he was brilliant on the show out here.
Gene was just as nuts as anybody on the panel. He would go out there and he would get just as carried away and just as silly as the rest of us.
I enjoyed being in charge. You had more control over your life.
Coming up, crossing the line of the network censors.
One day, I said, genitalia. And they said, cut. Sirens went off. They went beep, beep, beep.
Mark Goodson, he could take a bad idea and turn it into a good one. He could take a good idea and turn it into a blockbuster. He had that talent.
What are you doing out here?
It's a very auspicious occasion, Gene. As you know, in a very short time, this show, Match Game, has become the #1 daytime show in all of television.
Yes.
In 1975, Mark Goodson took his daytime hit into the night as well, through syndication.
Leo said, I like my women the same way I like my eggs.
One of the things that made the show explode was the fact that it was pushing the envelope a little bit.
He likes his women fried.
When I was watching Match Game as a kid, I didn't realize that it was becoming somewhat sexual. I didn't know. I just thought it was hilarious.
The big bad wolf said, I just came from a house where this old lady had the biggest blanks I ever saw.
Boobs. The first time anybody said boobs, oh, should we leave that? What is that?
Because I'm an actor from the legitimate theater, so I chose busts.
The head censor at that time, well, he asked his wife, and she said boob was okay, so he said that was okay. So that's how boobs got in.
Speaking of bazooms, Fanny, would you show us yours?
Well, as I said earlier, for sure.
Every once in a while, someone from Standards and Practices would start to twitch in the control booth.
We always knew when we crossed the line, when we see his head pop up, all we'd see is just the top of his head, and we knew that there was a discussion coming.
Standards and Practices back then was nuts. I mean, it was crazy time. Did you know that CBS for a long time would not allow Bugs Bunny on the air because he never wore pants?
I had no idea that a costume party could be so dangerous. I went dressed as a potato, and someone tried to blank me.
It was an easy show to do. You know, it was almost like the old joke, no math involved.
Oh, rules? Oh, there were no rules.
The show's producers worried more about the contestants than the panelists.
I was in charge of the contestant briefing. I had to stand up there and say all the words that you can't say on the show. The beginning of the speech was, I have a list of words that we ask you not to say on the show. Please do not say urinate. The Match Game word is tinkle.
Tinkling.
She said tinkling.
You can't bring yourself to say that. Wet. Those are your two alternatives for urinate.
The explorers were amazed to find a little penguin blanking a giant whale.
Please do not say fornicate. We say make love. Please do not use lay or laying. When you're talking about making love, we say make love. If you're talking about hens and chickens, you can say lay or laying.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
This chick is trying to feather my pen.
Okay.
No mention of genitals. Even if you think you've got the cutest word in the world, do not use it. And remember, there are questions where that's going to come to mind.
While dog sledding at the North Pole, Jack's blank froze and fell off.
And everybody laughs, and the answers are nose and toes and ears. Remember that.
Tell me what right. The red road nose and there's...
The nose does get cold, but my ears are the ones that always get it.
Yeah. How cold was it, Richard? Well, his rear fell off.
You could never go wrong with boobs or making whoopee. But one day, I got the idea that I was going to be scientific. So I said genitalia.
We are waiting, Marcia.
I know you are. God love.
And Richard Dawson looked at it and went,
and now, Marcia.
I don't enjoy being embarrassed on national television at all.
Are you embarrassed on national television?
You're never going to guess I had trouble.
I held up my card.
And they said, cut.
Bells went off, sirens went off. They went beep, beep, beep.
It rarely happened. I only happened more than once or twice in the 9 years that we were on.
Match Game 74, production number 0158. There it is.
It was a party. It was very much of a party.
We used to do 2 shows and have dinner.
The food wasn't that bad. And the vodka wasn't bad either.
Oh, I spilled my drink. Oh,
you spilled your drink. What a slob you are.
Let me suck these out.
There were a lot of pills going around.
I mean, getting them to get in their seats sometimes became a large problem.
Don't give your right name.
Especially after lunch. I'll call it lunch.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If you would watch a week of those shows, you can tell which show fell after dinner. It got a little looser, a little more free-spirited after those first 2 shows were out of the way.
Full steam ahead.
Aha! To go full steam ahead, you have to have a full head of steam.
You ought to know.
All right. Charles Nelson Riley characterized the experience beautifully when he said one day during the dinner break, "This is not a job, this is a social engagement." And he was right.
Coming up, one panelist leaves the party early.
I think he felt that he had more talent or something that was clearly psychotic.
You have nothing to smile about, do you?
I am inside.
Oh, inside.
Yeah. Yes.
I remember he left the show and everybody was thrilled.
I'm so nervous.
You're nervous. Take a deep breath, Rolanda. Okay. That's enough.
I always try to do a short interview with the contestants, the civilians, because, you know, they're nervous and the lights are forbidding.
Would you like to take a drink of water?
Yes, I would.
Would you bring the lady some water quickly there, Joe?
I remember one time I was trying to compliment her on the beautiful dimples she had when she smiled. And I looked right into her eyes and I said,
"Doesn't she have pretty nipples, pretty dimples there?"
What beautiful nipples you have. Just, you know, it just sort of, he just went blank.
Oh, Gene was he was marvelous. He was very flirtatious. I think there was a certain unpredictable quality to the show. You were not really sure.
Well, you want to go to commercial. You're late in holding the sign up, weren't you?
On stage, the so-called social engagement seemed spontaneous.
Now, will you remember to hold a sign up on time? Okay. Fade to black, go to commercial. Roll tape, go.
But by 1975, the match game was a well-oiled machine behind the scenes.
Questions had to be on 3x5 cards because they will put them up on a big wall and pick out a mix that they liked.
Dick wrote for us the whole time we were doing the show. He would mail these questions in from New York.
Goodson hired a staff of writers in Los Angeles to enhance and expand on DiBartolo's weekly submissions.
Let's see what it says here.
We'd force them sometimes into answers they didn't want to say. It was fun. They you know, it created some tension there.
Dumb Donald is so dumb. When he went to the wife swapping party, he swapped his wife for a blank.
I didn't even know who wrote those questions. Those questions were like from outer space somewhere.
Frank said, I think Harry has been working for Polaroid for too long. Because that weirdo is looking for a teenage girl who blinks in 60 seconds.
We did what all writers do. You write out-and-out filth so that the lesser questions don't sound so bad.
Nellie said, my husband, the baseball player, thinks love is like a baseball game. When we went on our honeymoon, he brought along a blank.
They were teeing up, and they teed it up more for Richard.
Richard, what do you have here for us?
Well, remembering my honeymoon, he brought along a relief pitcher.
He had those dry little responses, you know, and it seemed like, even though I think his eyes were glazed over, it seemed like he was into the game.
By 1976, the matinee idol of Match Game star panel wanted more.
Dawson had, for a couple of years, been on Mark to host a show. He wanted his own show.
We finally found a format that he fit in.
In July of '76, almost 3 years to the day of Match Game's West Coast reincarnation, Mark Goodson launched the Family Feud. The format was based on one of Dawson's specialties, the Super Match, Match Game's big board of surveys. That summer, Dawson began appearing twice daily. His popularity among contestants soared.
You gotta match one celebrity to collect.
Richard.
Richard.
Richard, please. Richard.
Richard.
I'll try Richard.
Richard. Richard, okay.
Well, you knew the contestant knew what they were doing if they picked or didn't pick Richard Dawson. If they picked him, they knew what they were doing.
Time of blank.
Time of day.
Time of day.
Every once in a while, he would screw up, and we were all thrilled.
I said, time of your life.
I was torn.
He would, like, do the wrong answer, and we go, God.
Man, there's our new star wheel. Look at that. Isn't that something?
They had to change the game because too many people were picking Richard. We got to come up with this wheel so maybe Charles or Brett will get a question thrown to them occasionally.
All right, good luck to you, my dear. Give it a spin. It must make one complete revolution. And here we go. It's slowing down.
On the very first spin, the plan backfired.
Now, wait a minute. No. Now, wait a minute. No, wait a minute. Hold on. Just a minute here.
Today, the debut of the famed fixed star wheel.
When I started to do Feud, I was still working on Match Game. But they brought a big wheel in to spin, which I took as a direct slight.
You have nothing to smile about, do you?
I am inside.
Oh, inside. Yeah.
Richard became less and less interested in Match Game. One week we came in, and I think he said he had some kind of a eye disorder. He was wearing tinted glasses.
I think he felt that he was better, or he had more talent or something that was clearly psychotic.
So the next day, he came in again. It was the same thing. But I said, Richard, you seem to be so unhappy here. If you want to be released, you know, we'll oblige you. So he finished the night, and he left. He didn't say goodbye to anybody, or he just left.
I moved on to greener pastures.
By the end of 1977, Feud held the spot Match Game had previously claimed, the #1 rated show on daytime television. Coming up, the last days of a game show dynasty.
After a while, you don't get a laugh when you say John always put butter in his blank.
He didn't do anything for the next 15 years except basically kill himself by doing nothing.
Now, let's see if we can resolve this conflict. Pam, you've got a match 3 to tie and 4 to win. No, we can't resolve this conflict because they're holding up the commercial sign in panic. What? Okay, you ready to do a commercial? What do you want to do? You want to do a commercial now? I'll do anything you want to do.
Match Game should have had a much longer run than it did have.
Commercial or no commercial, what the heck do I care? I don't care.
In the fall of 1977, as Family Feud surged into the #1 spot on daytime television, CBS moved Match Game from 4 in the afternoon to 11 in the morning.
Dumb Dora, so dumb. How dumb is she? Very good. You're hired.
When I was involved with daytime CBS, we were supplying programming for 6 hours a day. In addition to the daily scheduled fare of soap operas and game shows. Syndicated programming was on the upswing.
Networks had more to choose from. Soap operas also began expanding from half-hour to 1-hour dramas.
That meant something had to go.
The morning time slot meant no after-school viewers. Match Game's ratings began to drop.
On top of the flying saucer was a flying blank.
Flying cup. But it was more than just the time change. The times had changed.
You know, I said on top of the flying saucer was a Flying Dutchman.
When you're doing something that depends on pushing the envelope, so to speak, unless you can go on pushing it and going further and further out, after a while, you don't get a laugh when you say, John always put butter on his blank. I mean, after a while, nobody's going to laugh at that.
Madge, the manicurist, is soaking some lady's hands in
some part of the toilet, like where the tidy bowl man is located.
All right.
I remember back Match Game 73, Match Game 74. It was all right, but now.
Things just run their course. You know, everything runs out of steam after a while.
In 1979, CBS took Match Game off the network's schedule.
Thank you for showing up. You don't know what we've been through here.
Mark Goodson kept the show going in syndication until 1982.
Well, we were just on the air for 9 years, and then they said, well, it's over.
The man who'd been there from the beginning had the hardest time walking away.
He was upset. He didn't do anything for the next 15 years except basically kill himself by doing nothing. I don't know why. Maybe that was the ego thing, possibly. But it just broke my heart. It really did. It was sad.
Listen carefully. Everybody plays. This is it. Hollywood is full of blanks.
Our rating went down because we were at 10 o'clock, at 1 o'clock, and finally when we got back to our regular time at 4 o'clock, our ratings never came back, and then he canceled the show. Network vice presidents are brilliant men, brilliant.
Coming up, back on top, the old classic finds a new audience.
It's still #1 on the Game Show Network.
35 years later, we're still laughing at Gene Rayburn and the celebrities.
In 1983, Mark Goodson tried to revive his classic format in combination with the Hollywood Squares. Contestants played both games during the 1-hour show.
My father would do half of the hour of the game, and John Bauman of the Shana Naz would do the other half. And it was really not good at all.
The experiment lasted only 9 months.
Get ready to match the stars.
In 1990, the show appeared on its third network, this time ABC, with Ross Schaefer at the helm and old favorite Charles Nelson Riley in his old seat.
When the show went back on again and I didn't do it, he said, well, let's face it, it's not the same without Susan.
By 1991, it was gone.
My eyes are made from marbles, and my blank is a slinky.
Wiener.
My wiener is a slinky.
Another version made it to the air in 1998, hosted by Michael Berger.
Okay, my Johnson. Yeah, that's a match. There you go. My wiener. See, it's my third man. You got it. Yeah, you got it.
After one season, it too was canceled.
There have been a lot of attempts to remake Match Game itself, and none of them have been successful. I think because the memory of the original, even though it's been more than 20 years since it left the air, has just been too embedded in our minds.
There were certain strong personalities on that show, and I don't know, I guess there aren't any around today. I said it, oops! But there don't seem to be, do there?
Soon after the last attempt to revive Match Game, the host of television's first daytime party was honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award.
He was in really bad health, and his memory was going, and he just got up and he started weeping. It was so sweet. He just felt honored, but he couldn't remember to say anything, except thank you.
1 month later, November 29th, 1999, Gene Rayburn passed away.
For somebody looking back on your career, what do you want them to know?
I just would want them to know that I had as much fun doing it as they did watching it. It was a great trip.
It's been more than 30 years since Match Game was the #1 rated show on daytime television, and yet it's still on the air, and it's still a hit.
It's still #1 on the Game Show Network.
One last blink.
What I'm always threatening Charles with. One last chance.
One last chance.
And it was the best job I ever had in my whole life in this business.
I mean, people still come up to me, hey, man, saw you on a week of Match Game. And you go, thank you. And, it's whatever it is 30 years later. But people dig it, man. It's one of those great shows.
I think Batman and Robin are blank.
Queer.
I teach at a university, and just last week I looked around, and here are a half-dozen college students sitting around watching a 30-year-old episode of Match Game, and they are in stitches.